So let's talk about the migration model, another possibility to calculate the customer value. So similar to the retention model, the migration model is also an extension of the basic CLV model. So when do we use the migration model? The migration model is designed for always a shared scenario of customer relationship. So for scenarios where customers can buy from several companies at the same time. So having that said, it is suitable for models with a very short lifetime. So for goods or services with short or no contractual commitment, for example, for grocery shopping. And we extend the basic CLV model by the purchasing probability. So before we have a look at the formula, we have to take several assumptions here. The first assumption is that customers can switch between companies and be a customer of several companies at the same time. So sometimes you can buy groceries on a single day from 2 different stores. So that's very likely, right? So we have a second assumption: the longer since the last purchase, the lower the purchase probability. So this assumption simply says that when a customer hasn't bought from a particular business for a long time, it's not very likely that he or she is going to buy again in the near future. The third assumption is as follows: the customer base is divided into so-called recency cells, depending on the time of the last purchase. So we now have a look at those recency cells and how we set up this concept of migration models. So here's an example for the migration model. First of all, I want to talk about the table at the top of the slide. We have a customer base consisting of 1,000 customers. We have 3 recency cells, and we watch at 3 periods, so period T, period T1 and period T2. And for each period we have a purchase probability accounting for 30%, 20% and 15%. So for example, the 30% probability says that customers who have purchased in the previous period have a 30% purchase probability for the next period. And then we have some numbers highlighting the payments per buyer and the payouts per customer, so the income generated by customers and the expenses one company undertook for a single customer. Now let's have a look at how the pot unfolds. So we start with the 1,000 customers, right? That's our customer base. And the likelihood that those 1,000 customers will rebuy in the next period is 30%. So only 30% of those 1,000 customers will buy in T1, whereas 70% of those 1,000 will not buy in T1. The 70% is just the result from 1 minus 30%, yielding 70%. So that's a very simple calculation. So in T1, we suggest that 300 customers will rebuy, whereas 700 customers won't rebuy. So let's have a look at the next, at the next field. So again, it's the same as we just did. From the 300 customers, 30% are likely to rebuy in the next period and 70% are not likely to rebuy, so they won't rebuy at the company, yielding 210 customers. But this was just the first step. So we still have the 700 in the second recency cell, which we need to, consider in this calculation here. So let's have a look at them. So we know that for those 700 customers in recency cell 2, so please have a look at the table at the top of the slide, 20% will probably rebuy in T2. So we calculate 20% from the 700 customers, yielding 140 customers who again switch the recency cell, so go up to recency cell 1, so the most recent cell. So 20% of those 700 will accidentally rebuy or surprisingly rebuy in this period, and 80% again won't rebuy, so they move down to the least recent cell, recency cell number 3, and there are now 560 customers. So this was fun. Let's have a look at the next T. Again, we start with the first recency cell. We have the 30% and the 70%, so that's very easy. We have a look at the second recency cell. Here we again have the 20 and the 80%. And now it's important because we now have a look at the third recency cell for the first time. So now the 15% comes into the game, which is listed in the table above. And we know that 15% of those 560 customers in the last recency cell are now likely to repurchase. So 50% of those 560 customers are moving up to the recency cell 1, and the others, so 85% of those 560 customers are moving down basically to recency cell number 4. We don't have it here on the slide, but basically they're moving down to recency cell number 4, and there are now 476 customers. So on the right hand side, you see the logic, which I've just explained, and we now have to remember those figures, those numbers of customers for each period for the next slide, where we calculate the CLV, or a slightly adapted version. So here again, at the top of the slide, we have the identical table as on the previous slide. In the middle of the slide, we have a table where I just summarized the number of customers per recency cell in each period. So when T is 1, T is 2, and T is 3. And now we have to calculate the cash flow in each period. So in the first period, in the second period, and in the third period. So let's start with the first period. The cash flow in the first period is the 40 euros. So please have a look at the table at the top. So the 40 euros refer to the income generated by customers. And we multiply this 40 euros with the 300 customers of recency cell number 1. So now comes the tricky part. We also have to consider the expenses. So the 3.60 euros. And we multiply this expenses with the 1,000 customers, so with the total customer stock, so with the point where T was 0. This is the case because there might have been a lot of advertisement costs in the previous period. So this is the reason why the expenses are always multiplied with the number of customers of the previous period. That's a very important aspect here. So let's have a look at the cash flow of the second period. So, as it was the case in the first period, we multiply the 40 euros with the 90 customers of recency cell number 1. Then we multiply the 32 euros with the 140 customers who have just moved up to the recency cell number 1. And then we deduct the costs. So we deduct the costs from the 300 customers who were in recency cell number 1 in the previous period, and we deduct the costs generated by for the 700 customers of the different recency cells, so of recency cell number 2, and multiplied with the costs, so with €3.10. So that's the logic here. I've also added a call out to explain the logic. So the income always focuses on the current figures, whereas the expenses always focus on the figures one period before. And I kindly ask you to think of the cash flow of the third period.